The 3DS XL is Nintendo's next iteration on its 3DS hardware that was released earlier last year. The new redesign provides two new larger screens and a more comfortable design to hold. The face buttons on the 3DS XL remain unchanged from the original, while the circle pad pretty much feels a lot less loose than it did on the original 3DS. The select, home, and start buttons have also been redesigned on the 3DS XL to have their own individual buttons. That's a much better design than it was on the original 3DS. There's also been a change with the 3DS XL's 3D depth slider. The 3D notification light has been removed, and there is now a lock system for turning off your 3D. Sadly, the cameras on the 3DS XL haven't been improved upon since the original 3DS. They are still the same old 1999 cell phone cameras you've come to know and love from Nintendo. The glossy finish from the original 3DS has been replaced with a new matte finish on the 3DS XL. It looks a lot better, and it's a lot less of a fingerprint magnet. This also means there's less of a reflection when you're playing your 3DS games. On the left side of the 3DS XL is the volume slider and a place to attach a lanyard if you want to. In the front, you'll see your headphone jack that has now been moved to the left side of the 3DS XL rather than the original center spot that was on the 3DS original. You'll also find your charging and power notification LEDs on the right side. On the right side of the 3DS is an SD card slot, a newly positioned stylus, and the wireless on and off switch. This time around, Nintendo is providing a 4GB SD card rather than the original 2GB SD card found in the original 3DS. The stylus in the 3DS XL is made out of plastic and is slightly shorter than the extended stylus on the original 3DS. At the top of the 3DS XL are your two shoulder buttons, your charging port, your IR reader that can connect to future accessories like a future Circle Pad Pro for the 3DS XL, and your game cartridge slot that works with 3DS games and original DS games. To accommodate the larger screens on the 3DS XL, the pixel density hasn't been changed but has instead been stretched out a bit. You can see that slightly on the 3DS XL's font, but everything else looks pretty much the same once you had it and played it for about a day. And because of the new larger screens, the 3D view space is larger than it was on the original 3DS. This means you could slightly turn your head more than you were able to on the original 3DS without losing the 3D effect on your game. Additionally, the 3D effect just seems a lot better on the 3DS XL, not just visually, but mentally. I didn't have to take that many breaks playing the 3DS XL. It didn't give me much of a headache at all as it did with the original 3DS. With that said, you haven't played games like Super Mario 3D Land, Mario Kart 7, or Star Fox 64 3D until you've played them on the 3DS XL. They just look a lot better on the 3DS XL screens. Sadly, the same can't be said about the original DS games. While you can still play them on your 3DS XL, they just look very stretched out, and at that, they're not even stretched out full screen, so they're still not that good. You can still play them in their original resolution, but I don't think you'd want to, especially on the 3DS XL. The DSi XL still remains to be the best way to play your original DS games. The 3DS XL's battery life has also been improved upon. I squeezed out about 6 hours playing Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance, New Super Mario Bros. 2, and Super Mario 3D Land, and with my volume all the way up and 3D turned up all the way up. Speaking of volume, sadly due to the thin bezel of the 3DS XL, Nintendo engineers weren't able to fit the original round speakers that were in the original 3DS. Because of this, the speakers in the 3DS XL have a thinner stage than they did in the original 3DS. Other than what I've mentioned already before, the 3DS XL is pretty much the same old 3DS you either loved or hated that came out last year. You still have access to Nintendo's eShop that now has downloads for digital games, virtual console games, and now even retail games. You can still street pass other 3DS or 3DS XL owners to gather new puzzle pieces or new warriors to fight and find me. With all that said, I can safely say that the 3DS XL is the superior 3DS out of the two that are currently out right now. If you currently own an original 3DS, this is a hard sell. You could either purchase a brand new 3DS XL for $200 or possibly trade in your system at a game store that will let you transfer your system content over to the new 3DS XL and then sell in your system. Currently, that would leave your 3DS XL with the price of $100. On the other hand, if you've never owned a 3DS and you've been wanting to get one, I would highly recommend the 3DS XL. The larger screens do in fact make a huge difference, at least for the 3DS specific software. For all these reasons and more, I give the 3DS XL an 8 out of 10. For more information on the 3DS XL and everything 3DS games, be sure to visit gamingblog.net.